Let's go ahead and get started. The first one that I have right here is basically saying, why is it that the Bible in so many places seems to contradict science? Why is it that in many places it seems to contradict science in so many places?
Go ahead, Mo.
Basically, this is what I like to tell people too, and I see a lot of times in apologetics is that people try to go outside of the scriptures to address science and try to make it scientific. The Bible was never meant to be a scientific textbook, plain and simple. So don't try to make it a scientific textbook. And I think a lot of Christians flaw with that, and you will get jammed up if you bump into the wrong person that has been examining the scriptures. The Israelites, they believed the same thing that most Mesopotamian cultures believed back then, and that was the earth was flat. It sat on a body of water. There was an abyss that was held up by pillars, and there was a dome overhead. That's what they believed. You had very select few people that actually had a big educational background or some in-depth study of the stars to see, well, maybe it is circle, maybe it is round. So I think a lot of times I've seen books talks about all kind of scientific things in the scripture that I think is not verifiable from the scriptures themselves. Is it somebody that's trying to read into the text to try to find science and say, see, the Bible verifies this. Don't use the Bible as a scientific textbook, because it's not. It was never meant to be scientific, even from the beginning. The basic premise was to show that God was sovereign and everything was done under his providence, period.
Okay. So in that same vein, another person is asking something similar. It says, so why is it that it seems like a lot of biblical stories are taken from other cultures? And I think Brother Gay addressed a lot of that, but why is that?
Yeah, I mean, so we got to realize that copying isn't something that's new. Like you have Bar Jesus, the son of, which bar means. So you have people basically trying to copy the life or claim allegiance or lineage of Christ in Scripture. So the idea of false gods. I mean, just look at Exodus. Moses does a miracle by God. Pharaoh's Egyptians do a similar miracle or manufacture. So that's something that is just historical. The argument comes in is whether, like we did with Ma'at, did Moses copy? And again, I believe I showed you some things that were proved, because he's going against polytheism. That's the first commandment. So for him to try to copy something, he wouldn't oppose something that he's trying to copy. So we got to learn how to engage that conversation and say, hold up. All right, so we just kind of dealt with Ma'at. Now you try to bring up the Epic of Gilgamesh and say that came before the flood. Again, when you start getting into those things, there's no credible historical evidence of an actual Epic of Gilgamesh. And those are the things. So a lot of the times when you say it's copied or it seems like we're copying, you got to actually dig in to see that if their claim is even historical. You got to go there, because if you assume that it's historical, then you're going to get caught up, because they're going to say that this came before yours. And again, just because something supposedly came first, it doesn't mean that they are completely identical or that the Bible took from it. One of the things I go back to, because we do believe in the scriptures, is from my perspective, you can't come before in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Come on, doctor.
Come on, Doc.
Come on, Doc. Come on. Come on.
So, so that's how we roll. And I would say the Lord establishes. He establishes everything, even science. But like he said, it's not a scientific book. But in the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. That's just the first 10 words of the Bible. So we got to get back to what it says.
Psalm 90, verse 1 through 2, I would write that down. Many of you may be already familiar with it in terms of what Jerome just said about you can't beat before the beginning in terms of Jesus and his identity and his eternality and all that. So,
yeah, I would ask a couple of questions to that question. What I would ask is, are you talking about the general stories of the Bible? Are you talking about the parables of Jesus? Or are you talking about the Proverbs? based on that's different layers of questioning. Because if you talk about the Proverbs, we would say that there are Proverbs that were naturally known based on all truth being God's truth, and it's stuff that's findable through natural revelation, because through Proverbs they're general realities that you can benefit off of whether you're a Christian or not.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
So that would be the question. If you're saying Jesus' parables, then I would say, well, he was taken from life, but his applications are divine. The stories aren't. And then finally, if we're talking about Bible stories, I would just ask which one and then trace it and debunk it based on etymology. So that etymology meaning which, how it developed over time based on its beginnings that we can trace, because a lot of stuff was oral tradition. That's why when Pastor Jerome was talking about principles of Ma'at, like principles of the law were lived out by God's people before the law was written down. Like people knew murder was wrong before the law was written. You know what I'm saying? People knew that adultery was wrong before the law was written. Stealing was wrong. That's general natural law that I believe was handed down based on what God had inferred in Adam and Eve being born in the image of God, that would just hand it out and spread throughout all the nations, but it became corrupt and it lost its origins in God. That's what I believe. One of my theories on that, it was not even theory, it's just a reality of even what we see prior to Exodus. So.
Also, you can go to stuff like the Code of Hammurabi. It already had an ethical code. But basically, write this down. The Code of Hammurabi. You also have what's called the Enumu Elish. There you go. You also have what's called the atra-hasis.
Can anybody spell that?
I'm about to say, can you repeat those?
Now they can fake Hammurabi and be like, I got it close, but them other ones, Doc, they can't spell all that. Doc.
Repeat them one more time.
The Enumu Elish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, y'all don't know if that start with a P or an N or is it pneumonia? Is it?
It's E-N. I may not be spelling it correctly, but it's basically like E-M-U-M-A, Enumu Elish, E-L-I-S-H, the Atris,
Thank you.
A-T-R-I-S, Hasis. You also have what's called the Gilgamesh epics. Mm-hmm. And what these are Babylonian Sumerian stories that have a lot of similarities to what's inside the scripture. But one thing that you won't see, you will never see 100% parallel in any of the stories. But all ancient cultures and traditions carried similar stories because they valued, like Pastor E was saying, certain principles that needed to be told. It wasn't because one was taken from the other. There's no way to say which one came from which one. Even when you're dealing with the 42 laws of Ma'at. And sometimes you get the dumb Kemetic dude that thinks because there's 42 laws and only 10 commandments that 42 trumps 10, so therefore your 10 had to come out of the 42. Well, guess what? If you go into the Torah, you got what's called 613 mitzvot. So you got 613 laws. So now we done trumped you now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You get what I'm saying? So, but even within them laws, like Pastor E was saying, there are certain laws that were just universal. And every single culture embraced these things. And just to add on one last thing is that some of the things in the scriptures, write this down, you have to understand to be polemic. And what I mean by that is, if you study ancient Near Eastern religious texts, there was a battle going on, as it is still today. So right now we have a spiritual battle going on against principalities and powers in high places. And there was also a literary battle going on to where the gods was trying to trump each other in their own doctrines. But there's a reason why our God is called the Most High God, El Elyon. Mm-hmm. There's other gods that embrace that name. Baal embraced the name of El. So there's different deities that had El. You go into the Babylonian, do Ugaritic text, they embrace these names. But that's why God had to specify, I am the Most High God. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple. So, and what a polemic is, basically, sometimes in the scripture, God challenges ancient Near Eastern thought and traditions and stories by letting you know, I am more powerful than all of these stories that you heard of.
Yes, sir.
When we're talking about Jesus walking on water, it's not just to say, look how Jesus can walk on water. He's the man. That had an ancient cultural context as far as dealing with Baal and dealing with the gods of the oceans and the gods of the waters, who, as you see from the narrative, the 12 apostles was fearing, like, who could do this? Yeah. Who can still these waters? Because as far as their brain was concerned, only these water gods can do this. And this is what Jesus, Yeshua, is saying, I'm more powerful than all this nonsense y'all believing right now. And I'm going to show you.